Florida is one of the most recognizable places in the United States, not just because of its beaches or theme parks, but because of its unusual position on the map. It stretches between the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean, forming a long peninsula that points toward the Caribbean. That location has shaped almost everything about the state: its weather, its economy, its wildlife, its history, and even its identity. Florida is the only state that borders both the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean, and it has the longest coastline in the contiguous United States. With more than 23 million residents, it is also the third most populous state in the country. But Florida is more than a vacation image. It is a place where Spanish colonial history, indigenous resistance, rapid modern growth, tropical ecosystems, and global migration all meet. Geography is the foundation of Florida's story. About two-thirds of the state occupies a peninsula between two major bodies of water, which gives it an enormous amount of coastline and a strong connection to the sea. To the west is the Gulf of Mexico, to the east is the Atlantic Ocean, and to the south are the Straits of Florida, separating the state from Cuba. To the southeast lie the Bahamas, while Alabama and Georgia border Florida to the north. This position makes Florida feel both southern and Caribbean-facing. Its coastlines are not just scenic, they support ports, tourism, fishing, boating, and major real estate markets. The state's flat terrain, barrier islands, wetlands, and beaches have encouraged settlement, but they also make Florida vulnerable to storms, flooding, and sea level rise. Long before Europeans arrived, Florida was home to Native American peoples for at least 14,000 years. Its wetlands, rivers, coasts, forests, and prairies supported diverse communities with their own trade networks, cultures, and political systems. These societies adapted to environments that could be rich but challenging, using waterways as routes for travel and food gathering. When Europeans later described Florida, they were entering a landscape already shaped by thousands of years of human presence. This matters because Florida's history is often told as if it begins with European exploration, but the peninsula's deeper past belongs to the indigenous peoples who lived there first. Their descendants, and the legacy of later native resistance, remain central to understanding the state's identity. In 1513, Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon became the first known European to make landfall in the region. He named the land La Pascua, Florida, often translated as the Festival of Flowers, because he arrived during the Easter season and saw a lush, green landscape. Spain soon incorporated Florida into its empire, making the peninsula part of a much larger contest for influence in the Americas. In 1565, Spain founded St. Augustine on the northeast coast. Today, St. Augustine is recognized as the oldest continuously inhabited European established settlement in the United States. That fact places Florida at the beginning of European colonial history in what is now the U.S., long before many better-known English settlements became permanent. Florida's colonial period was marked by rivalry and instability. Spain controlled the territory for much of the early modern era, but Britain repeatedly coveted it, attacked it, and eventually gained control in 1763. British rule did not last long. After the American Revolutionary War, Spain recovered Florida in 1783. But by the early 19th century, the expanding United States increasingly looked southward. In 1821, Spain ceded Florida to the United States as part of a larger diplomatic settlement involving border disputes and U.S. recognition of Spanish claims in Texas. Florida became a U.S. territory, then entered the Union as the 27th state on March 3, 1845. Its transition from Spanish colony to American state was not simple. It reflected the struggle for land, security, and expansion. One of the most consequential and painful chapters in Florida's history was the Seminole Wars, fought between the United States and the Seminole people across several conflicts from 1816 to 1858. These wars were among the longest and most extensive of the American Indian Wars. They were driven by U.S. expansion, the desire to remove native peoples from valuable land, and the complicated presence of escaped enslaved people who found refuge among Seminole communities. The terrain of Florida, especially its swamps and dense interior, made the conflicts difficult for U.S. forces. The Seminole Wars left a lasting mark on the state and on federal Indian policy. They also remind us that Florida's incorporation into the United States came through conflict, displacement, and resistance. Florida's 19th century story also included the Civil War. On January 10, 1861, Florida seceded from the Union and became one of the 7 original Confederate states. Although it had a smaller population than many other Confederate states, Florida supplied food, salt, and other resources during the war. After the Confederacy's defeat, Florida was readmitted to the Union on June 25, 1868. Reconstruction brought political upheaval, but many of the deeper social and economic struggles continued for generations. Like other southern states, Florida carried the legacies of slavery, segregation, and unequal power into the modern era. Understanding Florida as a Sun Belt success story requires remembering that its growth was built on older layers of conflict, labor, and social change. The Florida that many people imagine today began to take shape in the 20th century, especially after World War II. Improved transportation, air conditioning, highways, and mass tourism made the state more accessible and livable year-round. Retirees, seasonal visitors, domestic migrants, and international newcomers arrived in huge numbers. Cities expanded, suburbs spread, and land that had once been remote or agricultural became part of a fast-growing economy. The Miami metropolitan area, anchored by Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach, became the state's largest metro region, with more than 6 million people. Jacksonville became the most populous city, while Tampa Bay, Orlando, Cape Coral, and Tallahassee grew into major centers. Florida became a symbol of the modern Sun Belt, warm, sprawling, dynamic, and constantly changing. Florida's economy is now one of the largest in the United States, with a gross state product measured in the trillions of dollars. If compared globally, it would rank among the world's major economies. Tourism is the most famous pillar. Beach resorts, cruise ports, amusement parks, and warm weather draw tens of millions of visitors each year. Walt Disney World transformed Central Florida into a global vacation destination, while Miami Beach represents glamour, nightlife, and coastal leisure. The Kennedy Space Center connects Florida to the history of space exploration. But tourism is only part of the picture. Agriculture, real estate, transportation, logistics, hospitality, healthcare, and finance all play major roles. Florida's economy thrives because it connects leisure, migration, trade, and land development on a massive scale. Florida's culture reflects centuries of movement. Spanish colonial influence remains visible in place names, architecture, and historical memory. Latino communities, especially in South Florida, have transformed the state's politics, food, music, language, and business networks. African American history is deeply rooted in Florida, from slavery and resistance to civil rights struggles and cultural contributions. Indigenous heritage, Caribbean connections, European migration, and Asian communities all add to the mix. The result is a state that is culturally Southern in some regions, Caribbean and Latin American in others, and highly cosmopolitan in its biggest metro areas. Florida has also attracted and inspired major writers such as Ernest Hemingway, Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, and Tennessee Williams. Its atmosphere of beauty, danger, reinvention, and escape has long made it a powerful setting for American storytelling. Florida's climate is one of its greatest attractions and biggest challenges. The north is mostly subtropical, while the south has a tropical climate. Florida is the only state besides Hawaii with a tropical climate, and the only state in the continental U.S. with a coral reef. Warm weather supports tourism, boating, golf, tennis, fishing, and outdoor living for much of the year. But the same geography that creates paradise also creates risk. Hurricanes, storm surge, extreme heat, heavy rainfall, and coastal erosion are constant realities. Because so many people live near the water, the state must balance growth with resilience. Florida's appeal is inseparable from its vulnerability. The ocean gives it identity, wealth, and beauty, but also brings some of its most serious threats. The natural world of Florida is unlike anywhere else in the continental United States. Everglades National Park protects the largest tropical wilderness in the country and one of the largest in the Americas. This slow-moving wetland supports species that seem almost symbolic of Florida itself: the American alligator, American crocodile, manatee, bottlenose dolphin, roseate spoonbill, American flamingo, and the endangered Florida panther. Offshore, the Florida Reef is the only living coral barrier reef in the continental United States and the third largest coral barrier reef system in the world. These ecosystems are beautiful but fragile. Development, water management, pollution, invasive species, and climate change all threaten them. Florida's future depends not only on building cities and attracting visitors, but on protecting the landscapes that make the state extraordinary. Today, Florida is a state of contrasts. It is a retirement destination and a young immigrant gateway, a theme park capital and a wilderness state, a beach paradise and a hurricane zone, a southern state and a Caribbean crossroads. Politically, it was long seen as a battleground in presidential elections, but in recent years it has moved increasingly Republican. Economically, it is powerful and growing, yet many of its biggest questions involve housing costs, environmental strain, infrastructure, and the risks of building so much along the coast. Florida's story is not just about sunshine. It is about how geography can shape destiny, how migration can transform a place, and how a peninsula at America's southeastern edge became one of the most influential states in the country. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.